Hey guys, thanks for joining us today. We are here at Baptist Village, close to Tel Aviv. And I got special guests with me today that I want to introduce to you, and they're going to give you some tremendous insight about what's going on in Israel, the war, the hostage release, and a lot of interesting things that you don't get from mainstream media. And so joining me today is Danny VanBuuren. He's the Chief Reserve Officer, Brigadier General, that's with us, and then Tal Ornan, Special Intelligence Unit. And so they got a lot of information, a lot of insight. They're here on the ground. And kind of, you were telling me off air a little bit about your guys' movement. And it's called kind of a call to duty, the flag.
Yeah.
Help our audience kind of understand where this started, why, what's the movement for?
Okay. So thanks for the opportunity. Just to put the record straight, I was the former Chief Reserves Officer.
Former, okay.
Yeah. And
both reservists, okay.
Yes. And I think it goes back to a year and a half ago, where some major inner crisis was started in Israel around the judicial reform that the government meant to start, and it was just, in my point of view, just to make to correct something that was done many years ago, where the balance between the court and the parliament was totally changed or shifted towards the courts or towards the judicial system.
Yeah.
And practically, ministers and the parliament cannot function while the entire policy was established or was ruled by the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
So there was the government meant to change this or to put the balance back to its place, and people practically started to freak out, and they argued that Israel, once this reform was done, Israel is not going to be a democracy anymore, and it was going to be a dictatorship and so on. It was naturally done from political reasons, and it is the far left or the left wing that managed to actually to help to convince the entire population in Israel that it's going to be a major crisis where democracy is going to be lost.
Wow.
And this was the background, and they were starting to do some demonstrations in the streets every day, and they blocked the roads.
Yeah.
And attacked parliament members and ministers.
Wow.
And from a personal point of view, my own friends started talking to me or tell me, if you think otherwise, then we are not going to be
Really?
We're not going to be talking to you anymore.
Wow, they're drawing lines in the sand. Wow.
And this was the background.
Wow.
And I think for me, the major issue was a bunch of pilots and later on many more reservists that refused to serve in the army if this reform was completed.
Yeah, we heard about that, and we were looking from the outside in thinking, what's going on? Is this a division within Israel? This is going to turn into a civil war. So, yeah.
I'd like to put some things more accuracy. Basically, they planned these kind of demonstrations before it was even declared that there is going to be some reform in the judicial system. They just took advantage of that declaration of their reform to go onto the street and use it as a kind of a vehicle.
Yeah, yeah.
And then came that copyright who said, okay, that's becoming a dictatorship, which is totally bull.
You're right, right.
And because it's all, basically the idea for the reform is simply because as any democracy, which is the system here is a bit different than the States, where you have a president, you have the Senate and the House of Representatives. Here we have a parliament.
Yeah.
We have a system where we elect few parties, usually a coalition government, and you have the parliament, you have the government, and you have the Supreme Court.
Right.
And in the last about 25 years, the process was that the judicial system, the Supreme Court has become stronger and stronger and gain more power.
Yeah.
And basically all the checks and balances between the Supreme Court and the government and the parliament completely gone down the drain.
Okay.
So therefore you can try to make a law and then they cancel it because they feel that it's not right. The problem is as well that they control who are the judges because they elect them, and like in any kind of system like that, they kind of got judges with the same opinions, mostly left.
Left.
Of judges, and therefore their decisions as well were from that angle.
Sure.
And a lot of people in Israel are pretty much alarmed by that because there are a lot of things that are being changed and not in favor of the country.
You know, we have the similar problem in the United States, and let me see if I can grasp this. We have leftists that have embedded themselves in our judicial branch of our government, and it's turned into judicial tyranny. They're supposed to interpret the law, but they end up making laws.
Exactly.
This is the same thing.
Is that the same thing that's happening?
Same thing that happened in Israel, and there is a strange thing that during the last 30 years or so, I think the public is mainly right-wing.
Yeah.
There is a majority.
Right.
There is a majority to the conservative parties, and nevertheless, the left rule the academia, the media, the judicial system, and then the government is practically blocked or cannot do anything because there are any decision made by the government or the parliament which the left wing don't like, then they just change it through the courts or through the media.
So this explains then what we saw in the West from America of why they were opposing Netanyahu. It seems like so bad. And, you know, we heard these rumors that guys in the Air Force, reservists, were not going to serve and different things of that nature. And we said, what in the world's going on here? But that was traced to that.
Yeah.
And wow, okay. So now I totally get it, and I think our audience gets it, because that's exactly what we're trying to do in America. I think that's what happened with us getting Trump in office, is we saw our courts, our media, and they were taking America in a totally different direction, splitting us in half. I mean, it was pre-Civil War type of mentality with a lot of people.
And cancel culture.
And cancel culture, no free speech, that kind of thing. And I think I can understand where you're coming from, because we went through that, and with Trump getting in office, it didn't solve all the problems, but it was the majority saying enough. You're dividing us with your woke policies, and for some reason, leftists don't think straight. I mean, it's just insane. I don't know how it is here, but leftists allow criminals, rapists, and murderers to come into our border and don't do anything, give them sanctuary status. And I don't know if you can comment, but I see similar things happening here.
There are some similar things happening here, but the main danger, I believe, is the whole world is talking about two-state solution.
Right, that's...
And when you're talking about a Palestinian state, it's basically Judenrein state. You can see it in Gaza. When we evacuated Gaza, no one Jewish person, even the dead ones, were left in Gaza. We took them as well.
Wow.
And in the Judea and Samaria, which is the ancestral land of Israel, of the Jewish people,
yes,
that was the meaning, having a Palestinian state which is completely free of Jews.
Wow.
And I can use again that Nazi expression of Judenrein.
Yeah, right.
While here, the leftists want to have a whole citizen state. And there used to be that what the Palestinians called the stages plan.
Okay.
And the stages plan was to use peace means and war efforts as well in order to gain land. And once they get a base on the land, get the rest of the land, in the end, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. That's the idea.
Yeah.
So when you have a Palestine which is Judenfrei, and then you have the state of Israel, which is not exactly a Jewish state anymore, but a whole citizen state.
Right.
The next stage, what is going to be? Palestine.
Right.
And that's the danger.
I think I would like to refer to the Palestinian issue.
Yeah.
Because I think this is the most challenging issue to solve, because this is, in the UN you have a special treaty for refugees, which is for entire refugees from entire world, from Syria or from Ukraine or whatever.
Yeah.
And it states that, you can be considered as a refugee if you were a citizen of a certain territory and you were expelled, and then you and your son and maybe your grandchild will be considered as a refugee.
Yeah.
But there is another treaty which refers only to the Palestinian refugees, which is a completely different treaty.
How so?
And it says that everyone that was here in Israel, in the state of Israel before it was born, in the 2 years before it was born, and is an Arab, it could be, was originally from Egypt or from Saudi Arabia and came here just to work for the British mandate in 47, and then they were sitting here and working for 1 year before the establishment of the state of Israel. Then they are considered refugees forever.
Forever?
Forever.
They have that status forever.
This is the treaty for Palestinian refugees, and this is the reason why you have in the UN the UNRWA, which is the only refugee agency that is dedicated for only one segment of refugees, and the entire world has another refugee
a different definition for it.
Agency. So this is what we're claiming is the refugee issue, or the refugee issues of the Palestinian is the main device or main vehicle which the Arab nations and the entire world are using basically to cancel or how do you say, to dismantle Israel. Basically.
Using the Palestinians.
Using the Palestinians as a major tool. This is the reason why you still have Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon, in Syria, in Jordan for 70 years or for 60 years, because they
gave them citizenship.
And the interesting thing is, you have, and they get money for this permanent status, right?
And not only that, when October 7th happened, you found you actually had we had videos of UNRWA workers, who were Hamas people, basically grabbing some corpses that they killed just a few minutes before in order to kidnap them into Gaza. And that's why Israel is, I think, established kind of a new law and simply kicking UNRWA out of Israel.
Yeah, good.
And I think by the end of this month they have to totally leave Jerusalem as well, all their offices and whatever.
Good riddance.
But that took years. Took years because people were talking about it before. Mm-hmm. Because what happened with, for example, the education Palestinian territories is that they completely have books full of incitement against Jews, full of antisemitism, talking about the idea of basically, finishing the state of Israel.
Yeah.
It will never exist. All those marches in Europe, in the States as well, of Palestine will be free.
On our campuses,
That's the whole idea. Now, we refuse to die.
Yeah, amen. Amen.
We refuse to disappear for some reason.
Amen.
We just kind of been saved somewhere around, the 40s by you guys, by the Russians, by the Brits. I mean, those who, came as ashes from the Holocaust. And in the case of our family, some of them came before, but it doesn't matter. That's where we are. And, having an independent Jewish state with a military force being able to defend itself, being the shelter of the Jewish people all over the world, that's the idea.
Yeah, amen.
And another thing that I think your audience needs to understand, once we're talking about Palestine two-state solution, and people say, okay, look, Hamas, we understand, it's a terrorist organization, we are not going to make any deal with them. But there is the Palestinian Authority. You have Mahmoud Abbas. Maybe you can make reason with him. So you need to understand that the ideology of both movements, Hamas, which is a radical Islamic movement, and the PLO, which is the basic movement of the Palestinian Authority, the ideology is the same. They have two different treaties. They both saying that Israel should be eliminated. Jews need to be killed or murdered.
Right.
And the only state is going to be between Jordan and the sea. is a Palestinian state.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
what they are basically saying, we are going to eliminate the state of Israel. There's going to be no more Israel. This is once you say in campuses in the states, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. You are saying kill the entire Jewish population.
Right. Exterminate them. Yes. Yeah.
Just today, the Iranian foreign minister, I think, or somebody else in Iran said, when Trump said that he wants to find a solution for the Palestinians in Gaza in Egypt or in Jordan.
Yeah.
So he said, why don't you send the Jews to Greenland? So,
yeah. There you go.
Well.
There you go. Yeah. No, it's that mentality, and I think the West doesn't understand a lot of the dynamics here. The West, unfortunately, and I was listening to Yoram Ettinger this morning, or the day before we interviewed him. Yeah, Ettinger. Yeah. And he mentioned something, and I'm sure it's going to resonate with you. He goes, the West doesn't understand. These people cannot be bought. You can give them all the money. You can give them all the supplies, whatever. You can give them land. It doesn't matter because they still want to kill you at the end of the day. And the West seems to think they can broker some deal, and these people will live in peace.
You can broker a deal with radical Islamists.
Right. Thank you.
The word
Thank you.
Peace doesn't exist.
Right.
In radical Islam. I've studied Arabic.
Sure.
I speak the language. I've studied Islam as well and the Quran as well.
Yeah.
The whole idea of jihad, the holy war, is that for the nation of Islam to basically conquer the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Whether you're doing it by infiltrating some of your people and then educating them, and then while you gain enough power, you're going to basically get a military and do it violently. Or if you have enough power, you'll do it violently.
Yeah.
And if you sign an agreement or a treaty, it's going to be until you gain enough power in order to break it and then conquer and occupy and of course kill everybody and whatever.
Right.
And when we talked before about Judeo-Christian culture.
Yeah.
Which is so rich and so deep.
Yeah.
And all the bases of democracy as well are in that culture. It took time, of course, because we did have our own tyrannies,
Sure.
Louis XIV and whatever, but we are in the 21st century. We're talking about democracies, Western democracies, and that's the whole idea.
Yeah.
And whether it's as well living in peace, thinking about livelihood, about economy, and developing technology, whatever.
Right.
That's the whole idea. Some Arab countries are moderate. You can see it in the Emirates, for example, but a lot of them are radical Islam.
Sure.
And what radical Islam has performed here in Israel is just murder Israeli ever since, I think it's more than 100 years ago. It's before the establishment of the State of Israel. We are a nation that is well aware of the possibility of being exterminated.
Yeah.
The Holocaust. My grandmother and grandfather barely survived from Netherlands, and they came here after the entire family was slaughtered by the Nazis.
Wow.
Then they came here. We had to fight for our very existence. My mother-in-law was murdered in a suicide attack in Tel Aviv. In 2004.
Oh my goodness!
And we each Israeli that you will gonna talk to knows someone or has someone from his family that was either murdered by a terrorist or was hurt in fatality in the war or so. So we are the notion of really fighting for your actual survival is something which is embedded in Israelis from our very from the day we are born,
right?
And we're not, and this is not something that we are. Some media in the West refers to Israel as an apartheid country,
right?
Or
crazy
as we are the colonialist who wants to expel the Palestinians. We are the native, inhabitants of the country,
right?
And the fact we are called Jews is because we came from Judea.
Judea, right.
And Arabs came from Arabia.
That's right.
That's right. This is our homeland, and we're not going to let it go.
Amen. And it's amazing how academia, the news, they want to rewrite history. I was just in the old city of Jerusalem with an archaeologist. We were going through the ruins. Every piece of the ruins is Jewish.
Of course.
There's no Muslim presence. There's no Arab presence. It was
naturally
the Jews.
no Palestinian presence.
That's right. No Palestinian presence, and even their claim of the Dome of the Rock or the Temple Mount is not even mentioned in the Quran, and yet they claim the Temple Mount.
Jerusalem is not mentioned in the Quran.
Yeah, Jerusalem's not mentioned, and it's like, hey, what's going on here? You know, and I think it goes back to the Islamic ideology of the Jews are infidels, Christians are infidels, we need to wipe them out. And I think that's what people in the West don't understand, that you can't just sit down and negotiate with people that want to kill you.
It's pretty amazing because you did have 9/11 at the time.
I know, right?
I lived in New York City when they I'm not sure you remember, but they tried to bomb the Twin Towers before with a car.
Yes, I do remember that.
I lived in New York at
Were you
that
there
time.
at the time? Okay.
At that time. And then later, 80 years later, they did the 9/11 with the planes coming into. And it's pretty amazing that people forget that.
They forget it, and then if you wanted to say anything about that, that's Wahhabism or that's coming from Saudi Arabia, all of a sudden you're Islamophobic.
Yeah.
Whoa, wait a second. Or you know, Israel defends itself against Hamas, and Israel is now the genocidal suicide, genocidal state, and the Hamas is the victims.
Sure.
And it's like, whoa, what's going on here?
No, I think I posted something on the social networks in the beginning of the war that there is some term that I cannot agree with. Israel has the right to defend itself. Do you know the term?
Yes.
You don't have to mention that you have a right to defend yourself. We are the only nation around the world that someone has to claim that we have the right to defend ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. Good point. So tell me this. Okay, so our audience, they get this and they understand. What they want to understand is, what's the deal with this hostage negotiation? Because there's like a three level step on it. But what a lot of people that are pro-Israel can't understand is, okay, they want the hostages back, which is a good thing. But then we're not told in the media that what Israel also gets in return is the release of terrorists back in the country.
Sure.
Help everyone understand this.
We can go back like 10 years ago.
Okay.
When an Israeli soldier was captured by Hamas on the border of Gaza. And he was taken to Gaza, he was taken to Gaza and was sitting in a dungeon over there for, I think it was like 5 years or so.
Oh, wow.
Without any visit of the Red Cross or so. And when we negotiated the release of this soldier, we released 1,027 brutal terrorists from our prisons, including one Yihya Sinwar.
Oh no, Sinwar.
He was released in this deal.
Oh my goodness.
He is the mastermind behind the massacre of October 7.
Yeah.
And this is the price we paid for one soldier.
Wow.
So we have like a background of a history of giving up easily these kind of terrorists. And I think there are three major reasons for this deal, which led us to perform not a very good deal, if I can be honest.
Yeah.
And maybe Tal can refer to this. The first one is the Biden administration.
Yeah, we don't like him, by the way.
Okay. The fact that they forced Israel to give the humanitarian aid to Hamas, kept Hamas in power.
That's right. It resupplied them.
Yes.
Basically, yeah.
They resupply them. The second reason is inner reason. It's the inner pressure that was made in the streets to make a deal at any cost. These kind of protests were managed mainly not only by the hostage families that naturally they can do whatever they think because they are in distress, but left organization took over these protests. And the pressure of the government, and they want to show that the blame should be put on Netanyahu, and he is the one that and they argue that we have to make a deal at any price.
At any price.
And the third reason is the the IDF, the chief of staff and any senior officers that were educated according to the ideology of the Oslo agreements, that we should make peace and so on.
Oh no!
We're fighting in Gaza not under the understanding that we have to stay there for a while and to take over to occupy Gaza, not forever,
right?
But for a certain time,
sure,
until we can get Hamas out of power,
right?
And these are the three reasons that led us to perform a very bad deal, hostage deals. Although every person in Israel is moved by seeing, all the soldiers and girls that are released. It's very moving.
Absolutely.
But the price is extremely high.
Yeah.
Look, it's changed since the 70s. In the 70s, there were a lot of kidnapped planes. For example, there was the TWA plane, if you remember, flying, basically being kidnapped to Jordan.
Yeah.
We flew all the way to Entebbe to release our hostages there.
Did.
The Germans later flew to, I think, Somalia as a result of the Entebbe case. But then it kind of went down.
Yeah.
There was this Jibril deal with 6 of our soldiers being kidnapped in Lebanon in the first Lebanon war in 1982, and then we kind of gave up and did a deal like that, and we suffered the consequences, and then the Gilad Shalit deal, and now this deal. We will suffer the consequences. Some of those multi-life imprisonment prisoners, people who killed like 40 people in a suicide bomb, 60 people in a suicide bomb, have been expelled to Egypt or to Turkey, which is not the best idea, maybe, because then they can do everything they want freely, and they already proved they could.
Yeah.
One of the guys we killed in Beirut in this war, Salah El-Arouri, was a guy that was expelled and basically was in charge of the Hamas actions from Turkey. So that's not a good idea either, but it's better than them being here. And some of them are being released to Judea and Samaria, and they're right here. A few kilometers from there, a few miles from here, and they will act.
You sure?
They will. Sooner or later, they will act. And one of the problems, I kept on arguing from the beginning, don't demonstrate, don't make a big deal out of the hostages, because once you do it, you raise the price. You're talking to the wall, because we have a culture today which is very similar to the American culture. It's all a reality show.
Yes.
We'll demonstrate we hate Netanyahu anyway, so he's to blame, blah, blah, blah. So we have to do it, and they raised the price. That's one thing. The other thing is that we have... I forgot the point I want to say.
It's all right.
So maybe I'll return to it later.
Okay. So here's the thing. On the second stage and third stage, it has Israel withdrawing from the area. So does that mean that Hamas gets the area back and starts controlling it? What is this part of the negotiations where Israel has to withdraw? It's not clear what that means.
I think it goes back to the basic that I mentioned before. What is the real issue here? And the real issue is the Palestinian refugee definition.
Yeah.
And I think what the Americans and mainly the Democratic administration is trying to do is to solve things which is very, religious issue between two religions in a very Western way.
Yeah.
So what Biden is saying, okay, you get out of Gaza, we will get Saudis on board to do some normalization here in the Middle East. The Palestinian will get a state. So we have everything one big happy family here in the Middle East. This isn't working because, as we mentioned, the conflict is religious.
That's right.
And what the Biden administration didn't understand, and I really hope that the new administration would understand,
so too.
Is that you cannot solve things by, as you mentioned before, giving away some territory or a state or so, because they want it all.
That's right.
There was a tweet by Anthony Blinken already at 10 o'clock on 7th of October, where he tweeted for Israel to use restraint.
Oh, brother.
By 10 o'clock on October 7th, there was already massacres going all over the south. And he erased this tweet. But then again, you saw later in their policy that they, on one hand, they sent us the weapons we needed. On the other hand, they made a bit of an embargo of certain weapons.
They sure did.
They did limit us. They didn't want us to go into Rafah. They didn't want us to go into Lebanon.
Right.
When the Pages action took place, they didn't want us to kill Nasrallah. Netanyahu made sure he doesn't update the Americans before we do it because they will forbid that.
Sure.
Luckily, we did.
Good.
So, running this war for almost a year and a half with the Biden administration was hell.
I bet.
And now the main question is what are we going to do in order to get rid of Hamas once we get the hostages out? I'm very pessimistic about it. I'm not sure we're going to go back to the war, and I'm not sure we're going to release all the hostages, including the dead ones.
Wow.
And I think what we neglected to mention is, we need to some zoom out, because it's not just Hamas.
Right.
It's the Iranians.
Right, the head of the snake.
And the head of the snake is sitting there in Tehran and is operating via these proxies, Hezbollah in the north, in Lebanon, Hamas in the south, the Houthis in Yemen.
Yep.
And they are, and what we managed to do in this war is just to dismantle Hezbollah from most of its power. They can rebuild them if we don't push them again.
Sure.
But the conflict in the Middle East will not be solved until Tehran is taken care of.
Yeah.
And you have to remember that they are several weeks away from having nuclear weapon.
Right.
And this is not mainly or only the problem of Israel. Having a radical Islamic regime holding a nuclear weapon, that's something that actually threatens the entire West.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's a good point. So with Tehran, are we talking about regime change, taking out all nuclear installations? What would that look like to cut the head of the snake off?
Okay, so it's a great question, because everyone here in Israel says that the supreme goal is maybe to get rid of the nuclear weapons of industry, entire nuclear industry of Iran.
Okay.
But and the Biden administration naturally didn't want to do this either, and just to come reason with Iran and maybe to come to a treaty or agreement with a deal with them. This is not going to happen.
Right.
But I'm claiming from the beginning of this war, the only way to end this conflict and to change the situation in the Middle East is to change the regime in Iran.
Okay.
And the U.S. and the entire West has the power to do so because the Iranian people don't want this regime.
Right. I've heard the underground, they don't want them in there.
When we talked about the Arab Spring, Obama made the same mistake. This administration thought that once the street is going to rise and Mubarak is going to fall, then will be the democracy in Egypt. And they didn't realize that Egypt has no tradition of democratic society.
Right.
It's different in Iran because the Iranians are different. They are not Arabs.
Yes.
And they have the memory of living not in a democratic society during the Shah regime, but it was kind of a Western society.
Yes.
And they want it back.
Good for them. I've seen pictures before the Ayatollahs took over. It had to be somewhere in the 70s or 60s, and it looked like a Western place.
Yeah, it was.
They wore bikinis.
Yeah, I mean, it looked like you were standing in California in 1973, and that's what this regime did. This ideology did to the whole
And it's
place.
happening as well in Syria now.
Okay.
From the Sunni side, from the Salafist side. Because
So
basically Al-Julani.
Explain that, what's going on here.
On one hand, it was in Israel's favor that Assad fell.
Okay.
Because all the backbone, all the logistics of Hezbollah kind of were cut off. So Iran can't back off Hezbollah with weaponry anymore. And what we did in the war is basically hurting Hezbollah pretty hard by the pager action, by the walkie-talkies action, by the point that we kind of dismantled all the Radwan main commanders and Nasrallah and all the management of the organization.
Yeah.
The other thing is that Al-Julani is a Salafist. He came out of ISIS. He was working with al-Baghdadi.
That's
he
crazy.
realized it's too dangerous for him. He was sitting in an American jail in Iraq. and I think Iraq or maybe on the border in Syria. I don't remember exactly where, but he's basically originated in ISIS, and he understood it's pretty dangerous to be kind of associated with ISIS. So he created an organization called Jabhat al-Nusra.
Okay.
And Jabhat al-Nusra is an organization which we kind of helped in the border because we took some of their injured people and helped them, some of their pregnant women and let them in. We built a hospital over the border in the Golan Heights. But then he took, of course, Assad down and he's controlling Syria. And in Syria there are three main forces. There are the Kurds, there are the Druze, and there are the Islamists of al-Julani, which are Sunnis. They're not Shiites.
Okay.
And they're basically now are killing them. The Alawis, which were the Assad fragment.
Okay.
And some of the Christians, by the way.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
The Druze are not willing to cooperate with him. They want a kind of an autonomy, independent state, kind of, and they expect support from Israel. At least you hear those voices.
Yeah.
And we have our own Druze who are, of course, supporting it.
Right.
There's a very interesting thing happening in the Golan Heights because the Syrian Druze, basically those that are living in the Golan Heights under Israel occupation, so-called, the Golan Heights is not occupied anymore, but it's been recognized by Trump.
By Trump, yeah.
But we occupied it in 1967, and those Druze had ties with Druze in Syria, so they never wanted to be associated with Israel because of Assad, the Assad regime.
Okay.
Once he fell, some of them did it before and had Israeli ideas and all that, but a lot of them are now kind of joining the Israeli army and want to become like the Israeli Druze.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
It changed the whole ecosystem, basically, of the Druze in the Golan Heights. And Turkey is behind it.
Yeah.
And he has inspirations, Erdogan, of kind of rebuilding the Ottoman Empire, maybe. So it's not only Iran on that side, which is hit pretty hard lately with all the proxies. It's Turkey as well, which is a member of NATO.
Right. Kind of. Yeah.
Two remarks I want to make. One of them is referring to Giuliani in Syria.
Okay.
And it goes, the same goes to any other terrorist, that once a terrorist takes out his uniform and changes them to a suit and starts maybe even speaking English or giving interviews to CNN, they are not stopping being terrorists.
That's right.
And Syria is going to be governed by ISIS, practically.
Basically.
This is the bottom line.
Yeah.
And the second thing is...
Syria used to be secular under Assad.
Okay.
Terrible regime, but still, they were secular.
They were secular.
Yeah. And what's happening in Iran, it's happening there now.
Wow.
And the other remark is, Tal mentioned a lot of aspects of the Middle East, which, it's like a big mess.
Yeah.
And I think nobody understands what's going on over there.
Right.
You have Turkey and Iran and Hamas and Giuliani and so on. The U.S. has only one ally here in the area.
Yeah.
It's the Israelis.
It's Israel.
It's Israel.
Yeah.
And I think this is something that the Biden administration didn't understand. They wanted to make peace in a form of keeping everyone happy.
Yeah.
The only way to make peace in the Middle East is to strengthen Israel.
Yes.
And to realize that once Israel is strong, it's the forefront of the Western world.
That's
here.
right.
And this is the way that America is going to make sure that this area is secure.
Yeah, amen. Let me ask you this. I want you to delve into, for our folks, the mindset that you guys are dealing with, because the liberal leftist mindset is they think that appeasement is the answer. Appeasement can lead to peace. But help our audience understand, in the Middle East, how is Islamic terrorists see appeasement? How do they view that?
You are the expert.
It's very simple. If you're weak here, you're going to be eaten.
Okay. Elaborate on that, because I totally get that.
As simple as that. So you can make peace, but you have to understand it's peace out of interest, which is probably the case everywhere.
Sure.
In Europe, they had hundreds of years of wars, and yet they're pretty much in peace in the last 80 years. We just had the Auschwitz, the International Holocaust Day the day of the release of Auschwitz. That was just yesterday, 80 years ago. On one hand. On the other hand, the Middle East, as your folks out there already understand, it's pretty complex.
Yeah.
Because when you're talking about the Jews are not Arabs.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Between the Arabs, you got the Shiites and the Sunnis, and you got a lot of other groups, which I wouldn't mention now because I don't want to kind of
There's a lot of them. There's a lot of them.
But a lot of them. And for many, many years, Israel has tried to keep the war or the confrontation based on territory.
Okay.
And not to making religion.
Right.
Because how can few million Jews can fight 1.5 billion Muslims?
Yeah.
That's totally impossible. But what happened in the Muslim world, and by the way, some of it is thanks to Obama as well.
Sure.
When he became a president, the first thing he went to Saudi Arabia.
Yep.
And he kneeled.
Mm-hmm.
And then he did the Cairo speech.
Yeah.
And that made what they called Arab Spring, which became quite an Arab winter, spread.
Yeah.
And since then we have like 4 Arab failed states in Libya, in Tunis, in Yemen, and in Syria.
Wow.
And there are failed states, and Lebanon as well, by the way.
Yeah.
And you can see it whether it's in the value of their currencies, whether it's the war, constant war, massacres, whatever. And it's not stable.
Right.
And you may say Israel is not stable either. Look, you had October 7th, but then again, still most of Israel, the economy is pretty strong.
Yeah.
And I keep claiming we're not going to have those 10 dead years we had after the October War of 1973, because the economy here is much stronger.
Yeah.
Now. So, and I see it. But so when you're talking about the mess of the Middle East, yes, you do have the Abraham Accords. It does prove to hold on. The Emirates, Bahrain, Israel, in spite of the October 7th massacre and the war. Trump wants to get Saudi Arabia in, but they never said one thing. They never gave up the idea of Palestinian state, something that we cannot accept between the Jordan and the sea, period. There couldn't be, it's one of the main thing of our movement that we're saying basically, there can't be another, how would I say it, official entity between the Jordan and the sea, but Israel.
That's right. I think David Friedman wrote his book, One State Solution. It's got to be Israel running the whole thing. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it is. I think one of the things we are trying to do this is we have some event planned, which is a flag march or a convoy of flags, starting from the river, from the Jordan River, which 3,000 years or more Joshua crossed this river.
That's right.
And the Israelis entered the state of Israel.
That's right.
And ever since, we have been around all the time. There were no Palestinians around. There was no Palestinian entity or people.
It was just made up, right?
They were made up. And the word Palestinian goes back to the Romans. This is a nickname they call the Jews.
Right.
So it's something that was made up. And we are planning this event in order to express the connection between the 3,000 years or more of history of the Jewish people to this land, starting from the Jordan River, going back to Jerusalem, which was mentioned in the Bible, I think, 600 times or more.
Yeah.
Never was mentioned in the Quran. And go back, and it is going to end in Tel Aviv, the first Jewish city. Hebrew city, that was founded in 1909.
Okay.
And this is something we as a as opposed to from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. The slogan is going to be from the river to the sea, 3,000 years of Jewish history.
Amen. And when is this event going to happen?
This is something we are planning, and I think in 3 or 4 months or so.
Okay. You guys have a website or anything that people can go to? Why don't you give that to our audience?
It's called Ladegel.
Ladegel.org. Ladegel is Ladegel. egel.org.
Okay, yeah, org. Good. Well, guys, I want you to make sure you tune into that and follow that. I know you guys' time's limited. If there's anything you can say to the West, or those who maybe are on the fence or pro-Israel, what's your parting words? What would you encourage them to do?
I think perhaps you know the book written by Huntington, Civilization Collide or Collision of Civilization.
Yeah.
He mentioned in 1996, I think, that whenever there's a conflict between two different civilizations, it's not a conflict that mainly can be solved because it is based mainly on religion. Yeah. And the West should understand that what we are experiencing now is a clash between the radical Islam and the West.
Yeah.
And Israel is the forefront of this clash.
Yes. And
the West should understand that we all should be united in the fight against these radical movements. Otherwise, as they say, the West is next.
Yeah, you're right. That's a good point. It's a sobering point, and I hope people heed that, because you guys are on the forefront of protecting the West from
that's right.
From that worldview. And that worldview doesn't blend. We've already seen it in the United States. We have pockets of Islam that won't assimilate, won't learn the language, and want to practice Sharia law. And we're seeing it a little bit. But I hope people wake up, because to realize you guys are on the forefront. And,
right.
and if they get through you, they go to America and they go to the rest of the West.
They already got through us. They just flew over us to Europe.
Right. They've already taken over
Try to go to
Europe.
Brussels. Try to go to Luton or I don't know, some cities in England.
Yeah.
Where they're practicing Sharia law.
Yeah.
Where the police doesn't get in.
No go zones.
Neighborhoods in Paris. I flew to Paris a couple of years ago. There was a guy sitting next to me and he told me, look, it's not the Paris you used to know. Just don't go here, don't go there. And I've been to Paris a few times. And before, in Paris, the romantic Paris we all want to know and love, and we see in the movies and whatever. And it's not like that anymore. It's not like that anymore. And it's pretty frightening. Yeah. They burn churches.
Yes.
We all heard about the Notre Dame. I'm not sure it was an accident.
I don't think it was either.
And there are kind of dozens of other churches that have been burned in France.
Absolutely.
So we all have to think about it.
We do. It's very sobering, but that's what I appreciate you guys with your message, and I know our audience gets behind that, because we want to save the West.
And I want to say another thing.
Go ahead. Yeah,
they stole the word liberal from us, because I considered myself a liberal. I don't hate gays. I don't hate lesbians.
Right.
I don't hate transgender. It's just not the main thing, It's just like 3% of the population.
Right.
But they made it the main thing.
That's right.
And they kept on talking about it all the time as if it's the entire population. And that's the idea. It's completely out of proportion.
Yes.
I don't hate them. I don't dislike them. They're people. They're human like me. They are entitled to their lives, okay? It's just that they took it to the extreme.
Yeah.
And they took the word liberal and completely polluted it, because you can't be anymore. If you're saying you're a liberal, you immediately looked as a wokies, as kind of a woke culture, which is totally out of proportion.
Right. And I think, to your point, that's where even the Democrats in the United States lost this election, because they appealed to that margin, transgender, LGBT, wokeism, and people are like, wait a second, we're traditional families. We want a normal life. That's the margin. And they wanted to they brought the margin and ran with the margin.
Yes. And this is the idea, as we mentioned before, to dismantle the entire institution of the society.
Yeah.
And as we said, we are not religious people, but we are tradition. We believe in tradition. We believe in Jewish heritage.
Right.
And if we don't have this, we don't have anything. It's not just a bunch of individuals living, just practicing free speech.
Yes. And you're making a good point, because the basis of democracy, whether you're a practicing Jewish person or a practicing Christian or whatever, the foundation has to be adhered to, which is life, liberty, justice, those types of...
And real democracy.
Right, real democracy. Exactly. Not cancel culture, free speech, all that is encompassed in democracy. And if we lose it to Sharia law, we're done. This will be the end of the West. And so I'm glad you brought that up, because I don't want people to think, well, this is a localized regional thing in the other part of the world. No.
It's not.
This is a war against the West, and Israel is the one fighting right now in the middle of this. So, and you're right, Europe has been completely taken over in some of those areas. Yeah. And because of leftism. Well, let them all come in, we'll appease them, we'll start giving them money, and all of a sudden it got taken over. And now they're calling it
you can see it in Sweden, by the way.
Right. Exactly, and they're calling it the Great Replacement. They're calling it now the Great Replacement of Europe. Yeah. So guys, I think whether you're listening in Canada or America, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, all the West, I think you better listen to these guys. They know what they're talking about. They're on the front lines. They see it, and guys, I think it's time to sober up and realize we need to fight for the West. We need to support Israel. We need to do everything we can, because they're coming, like Trump said, don't think they're coming after me, they're coming after you. And I think we appreciate what you guys are doing. You're on the front lines, man. And so we support you. And I hope everyone tunes in to your website and gets information and follows you guys. But thank you for the work you're doing. We appreciate it. You're saving the West. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you guys. We're out of time, guys. We'll see you next time. God bless you. Take care.